Welcome to another edition of Trunk and Tales as we navigate what is happening in the world of politics. I'm Stacy Smith, and since you're watching or listening to this podcast, I ask that you hit the like or the subscribe button. There's no question President Trump has dominated the news cycle, not only here in the United States, but around the world. However, some Americans are now becoming less optimistic about the future, and some of the president's agenda is now being challenged in the courts. We'll talk about that and more in this edition of Trunk and Tales. And with me to talk about this is my panel of political analysts and experts, and they are the former Republican governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Corbett. Mr. Corbett also served as the state attorney general and as the U.S. attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania. Mr. Corbett teaches law right now at Duquesne University. Also joining us is Keith Schmidt. Keith was the state director for former Pennsylvania Republican Senator Rick Santorum. Keith also consulted on Santorum's 2012 presidential bid, and he has his own consulting firm. Also joining us and holding down the fort for the Democrats is the former Pennsylvania Auditor General, Eugene DePasquale. Eugene held that office for 8 years, and prior to that, he was elected to the state legislature, and he now teaches at Pitt and someplace else, right?
And your college as well.
Okay, great. How are the students these days?
They're doing great. I mean, you know, it's a different world than when we were doing it, but I will tell you this. They're very good academically. The negotiation on the grades are a little unique. I don't remember ever thinking a grade process was a negotiation, but
I agree.
That's the world we're living in today.
Oh, wow. Well, that's true. Well, you know, I'm not quite sure where to begin. As Keith has suggested, this president and his agenda has become the focal point of the media and conversations even at the bar. So let's talk about what's happening. And I'll ask the same question that I've been asking now for the last month or so. What are the political ramifications, if any, for the president and especially for his party? Now, there's been no argument. One of the reasons that Mr. Trump was elected in last November was because of the economy, specifically because of inflation. To his credit, the inflation rate has not gone up. In fact, so far, 3 months into his presidency, the rate has dropped from 3% to 2.4% in March. But, and there's a big but on this one, there is great fear that his imposition of tariffs will send prices higher and disrupt the economy as we know it. Another statistic I'm going to throw at you. On February the 19th, a month after he was inaugurated, the S&P 500 climbed to 6,144. Less than a month and a half later, it hit a low of 48.35. That's a drop of 1,300 points, or a decline of 21%. It has bounced back from that low, but it's still down more than 600 points since he was inaugurated. And then just yesterday, the Fed chair said that the Fed may find itself challenged by trying to keep the inflation in check and fostering a healthy labor market. That sent the markets down as well, significantly in the afternoon. So, my question, and whichever one of you want us to take it first, that's fine. Is this sustainable from a political standpoint? Not necessarily for Mr. Trump, because he only has, 3 years left in office, but for his party, the Republican Party.
4 years.
Well, he's already...
3 3/4.
3 3/4, that's right. Look, I'll go first, maybe just to, have to kick it off. And that is, look, and Keith may smile when I say this, and that is, if the election were today, I think the Democrats win Congress, for example. There's energy on the left, et cetera, but the election is not today. If the tariffs do drive up prices and we head into a recession, I think it's going to be a really, really tough slog for the Republicans in the midterm. And let's just state one election at a time here, the midterms. Having said that, if that doesn't pan out, then I think we're probably in a coin flip type of election. The reason why most presidents, if you had this type of chaos, would hurt them. But I think Mr. Trump's base loves this type of chaos. So he's just a unique political character when it comes to that. So to me, right now, advantage Democrats, but we've got a long way to go politically.
Keith?
Oh, me? Okay, Gov, you're deferring. Listen, it's been a disruptive 87 days. I mean, it is. So a lot has been handed to the American people for them to digest. And every time I'm on this program, I say the same thing. He is in a hurry. This is his second term. Federal elections are really all about even numbered years. So as a result, he knows his runway is till November of next year to show that whatever these dramatic changes that he's putting in place will have an effect in a positive way. And I've said this also, that we don't have to have a complete turnaround in a year and 9 months, but by the summer of next year, he has to show that things are moving back to normal and that what he put in place is working, because it pretty much all comes to a big halting stop in November of 26, if he loses one or both houses of Congress. So he knows that it's it's an enormous gamble. I mean, what he's doing is the question now is there enough time with these dramatic changes in the economy and our policies? Are we going to see the fruits of that by November of next year? Apparently, he has a team that says that will happen, but it is a gamble. But I can tell you the short-term effect is the odd-numbered races, because the federal races are all even-numbered years. The odd-numbered races, judicial races, municipal races, state races, statewide races for other offices, the Republicans can expect to take a pretty big hit this year because of these dramatic changes and this uncertainty. The question is, can he get back into fashion and start showing that this idea of major change in the economy, a different direction, can bear fruit by next fall? That the jury's still out, and as I always say, we're 87 days in, guys. It seems like it's been a year or two, but we're still almost 2 weeks from 100 days. So it's really hard to say anything that the die is cast in either direction.
So I get, excuse me, I guess my perspective is nobody knows where he's taking us. In fact, I'm not sure he knows where he's taking us. He is an agent of change. He believes in everything that he does is right, but he's also flexible enough that when it's not working correctly, he can just shift gears, retract what he was doing and go do something else and say, well, that's what I planned all along. And I think that for the newspapers and the political intelligentsia, it's driving them crazy. They're pulling their hair out.
I think the gov wished he and I could have gotten away with that a couple times.
Absolutely. Because there's just no anticipating what his next move is going to be. To the point that I'm not even sure his staff knows what the next move is. I think he comes up with an idea and says, I'm going to run with that. I haven't studied him enough from his book of his pre-presidential years, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was very much like this in his business dealings with individuals. Doing one thing and then I'm changing my mind, I'm going to go somewhere else. The bad part about that is how it does, and he knows this, how it does affect the markets and how it's affecting our relationships around the world. Now, he's considering running for a third term. I don't think there's any way possible for him to run for a third term. But if he believes he can't run for a third term, he's putting all his chips in this last term because he has nothing to worry about getting reelected for himself. Is he worried about the party? I'm not really sure he is.
Everything's a negotiation. Everything for him is transactional. And he will pivot because in the middle of a negotiation, he might learn something that says, if I go in this direction, I could gain points. He's very transparent, and that makes some people very happy because you see him coming. I always say if he punches, he'll punch you in the face. Right. You'll see him coming. He'll tell you that he's coming, and it's not like we can't be surprised because that's how he conducts government in the way he conducted business, as the governor said. It is a very transactional way of doing things. And as far as I'm concerned, there is 0% that this whole third term talk means anything. But it means something to him. It's optics to the world. His biggest fear is to become a lame duck president too soon. He wants to tell people, hey, there's a chance I might stay. Like, you might have to deal with me beyond 4 years. And I think that's literally part of the negotiation plan. Put it out there that I'm at least looking at this, and I'm full of energy. In fact, I actually think I could do another 4 years. So don't dismiss me that for some reason I have a short time here and all you have to do is survive me. You're not going to survive me. I still will be around for a while. So I really think that's part of his negotiation optics. I don't think there's anything about it that's real. It would take a constitutional amendment and the passage of 2/3. It's not going to happen.
Two things to follow up on, Keith. One is I do think his whole life is a negotiation. All of us that have been in the arena, we know people that have principled views on abortion, whether it be left or right, principled views on capital punishment, left or right, marriage equality. The list goes on and on and on. To me, that is all a negotiation with him. I jokingly say that if one group walked in and said, we'll endorse you, he could, because it's all a negotiation, because I think he likes power, and I think now tariffs I think are different. I think he's always been for tariffs. But I think this is all a negotiation, like Keith said. And I also think that extends to this third term talk. There is no constitutional way in the world he gets a third. It's just not possible. But he does know that if he says out loud right now, not only am I not running, but JD's my guy, he knows the whole room shifts, because this is a game of you have so many chips in the bag. And if the whole room then starts to shift to JD Vance and whoever the Democrats run, and he all of a sudden starts to become that lame duck, that would kill him. I don't mean like literally kill him, but he is someone that craves the spotlight, craves the attention, craves power, and he is not giving that up until he has to.
I don't know about you, Eugene, but in the past, when I brought up polls, the governor and Keith have said, they don't mean anything until about 2 weeks out from the election or so. But there are polls that are taken every month, and one of them is the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Survey, and it has dropped significantly since the one in March. As a matter of fact, it went from March of 2024 at 77.2% down to 50.8% in April of this year. Also, the Fed has its own set of surveys, one of them by the New York Fed, and those are showing a decline as well. As a matter of fact, the mean unemployment expectations, or the probability that the U.S. unemployment rate will be higher 1 year from now, jumped by 4.6 points, and that's a big move on the Fed's calculations. So does this have any impact at all politically down the road?
So where I think it does have impact, the line is a recession is when my neighbor loses his job.
Yeah.
Depression is when I lose my job. So this is all, how do people think it's going? And I think Keith's right about this. Sometime around next summer, this stuff just gets baked in. You even though the polls may not matter until 2 weeks out, a month out, but the mood of the electorate by, say July, August of next year, that just begins to get cemented in. And so the question is, these things that he's doing now, does it create so much turbulence that people lose their job, prices go up, and they feel that there's, the captain has sort of lost his mind? Then then you're heading towards the iceberg if you're a Republican. Democrats run the way big gains. But if it's settled in and that stuff hasn't happened, then I think they can weather the storm and survive politically in November. So when I come back to that consumer predictor, to me, that is irrelevant now. The average person is not looking at the Michigan consumer projections and saying, oh, it's how do they feel right now? And that is, they feel, according to the polling, that they are nervous about the direction. Nervous about the direction is different than it's collapsing or rising. So there is, basically, I think the American economy right now is treading water in choppy waters, and the question is, does a tsunami come in, or do you make it back to shore safely?
Yeah, I don't know how this goes all the time, but it's interesting you brought up about right direction and wrong direction for the country. I just took a look a few minutes ago on the last three surveys, the April 11th, 14th, and 16th on direction of the country. I averaged them out. It's going in the right direction. People say 40%, wrong direction 50.5%. At this point, but
by the way,
Keith,
I don't want to
close.
Yeah. And one thing to add to this before the governor and Keith take over is that has been a pretty steady number for about a decade. One of the reasons why Mr. Trump won again is that people have been frustrated about the state of the country for over a decade now. So that is actually not a new phenomenon.
Okay.
I think one of the things we ought to be watching isn't necessarily the House of Representatives, but the Senate. Republicans have control of the Senate right now by 6, I think. at this point in time?
53-47, yeah.
Okay, so total 6 in some respects. But, and if they want to keep it, they got to keep some in these 2 years, and I think they have a number of people up next year. That's a longer term play than the House is every 2 years. Right now, I don't see the House kicking back at all to some of the directions coming from the White House. I do think that you're going to see the Senate saying, wait a second, we're going to be here after you're here. We want to make sure we're here after you're here, and in control of the Senate. So that's where I'm going to keep my eye as to what a new leader in the Senate, which I think is very important for the Republicans, how he's going to interact with the president.
Well, Stacey, I believe that, we've talked often, and I know I've talked often about the enamoring world public and the enamoring of the people of America of just kind of following the president's every move. People in my neighborhood or my family or my friends or my colleagues at work talking about the presidency in ways that they never did in my lifetime, that they're following it like it's a series on Netflix. I mean, it's just, and it's not lost on the president. The president knows very acutely that everybody is watching him. So my crystal ball tells me, at what point is he going to tell us more about where we're heading? Because he really hasn't. He's done some dramatic things, but if you have control of all that and everybody's watching, why are you not dishing out a little more hope as to, here's my agenda, here's this short-term pain, and here's the long-term gain? So my crystal ball says, and I think I said it on the last time we got together, is at the end of April, it's 100 days. So that's a natural, somehow that's a benchmark in almost every administration in my lifetime. So I would not be surprised if you would have an East Room or an Oval Office address sometime in May talking to the American people about where we're heading and what I did in my first 100 days and why I did it. So I really believe that's going to happen. And I fundamentally believe, the more I look at everything that's playing out there, I believe this is the beginning of his war with Communist China. I believe that the president fundamentally believes that they are our biggest economic threat and are our biggest national security threat. Their presence at the Panama Canal at both ends, the fact that they have icebreakers in 28 to 30 icebreakers in Greenland, they're moving in our hemisphere, the fact that they control the marketplace in a disproportionate way, the consumer marketplace in America. And one other fact that I always think you need to lead with is, although the numbers are down, it's still around 85,000 fentanyl deaths a year, and by unanimous agreement, 95% of that fentanyl comes from Communist China. So we're losing young people, largely people under 30 years old, to the tune of 6 figures a year, and we could lay it at the foot of Communist China. But there's another thing that he understands. We all talk a game about supporting your local grocer, the small guy, or all this other stuff. We talk a big game, but in the end, consumers go to what the cheapest price is. They may say one thing, but unfortunately, they don't always live it. So literally, I think the president, because we've never been at direct war, we know they're communists, but it's not like we fought a war, a land war, or anything. We don't see them as the enemy that the president clearly sees them as. So what he has to do to them is he has to make the tariffs so oppressive that you can't buy from China anymore. You have to decide either to buy an American or buy from another source. And the problem for China there is no consumer market on the planet that consumes what Americans consume. Our 340 million people, you can't replace that. If China loses that, if they lose it, they get hit on day one. They cannot sustain, they can't replace it anywhere else because nobody consumes it to the level the American public consumes. So I think this is a direct shot across the bow, and I think it won't stop until that tariff on China is over 200%. I think that's where it's going to level off, somewhere between 200 and 250% to take them off the table. And then the real negotiation begins with all the other countries on how we supplement that or bring these industries back to America. But in my mind, this is the beginning of a longer war with Communist China.
Stacey, let me follow up on that because, and I say this not to try to be funny. If Keith were president, I'd have a lot more confidence in that approach because I know Keith would be disciplined in staying along that path. I do think that we have real concerns with China. Be clear about that. And we want an economic war, not a military war. Let's be
Sure.
clear about it. Nobody
wants to have a-
no sane human being would want a military war anymore with countries that have nukes. My concern is, and just in a sort of a back and forth on this a little bit, and that is, I would rather have us built alliances along with Canada, Mexico, Europe, and some of the other countries, Vietnam, etc., to go and take on that economic war, which I think Keith is right. We all should be very concerned about that. And yes, the fentanyl deaths are down, but and we all say one too many, but that is coming in from China. The economic war of what's happened to our manufacturing base. I am concerned that he's going to have the discipline to stay on that track because sometimes the next idea that comes into his mind can get him to change course. For example, the TikTok ban, where not only am I concerned about the economic war, but I'm concerned about the propaganda war that goes on with social media, with TikTok and these other companies. And I know China is behind that as well. And so he was for it. Again, to Keith's point, I think he saw the danger of it. Then he backed off it. And we could all have our theories on it. So again, not to try to be funny about this, if he's willing to be disciplined about it, that's one thing. I just get concerned that, if he gets some bad poll numbers, he's going to shift gears. But there is no question we are in an economic war with China, and Keith is spot on about that.
I'll just add one of my main concerns, having been an executive for a state, is that as the executive, you can have all the opinions and decisions that you want to make, but you really need to have a good staff surrounding you. And you have to have a staff that you're willing to listen to. And I am concerned that just as in his first term, he has a group of people that are telling him what he wants to hear, not what he needs to hear. And as a result of that, I don't see him changing his modus operandi at all. And I think it is, how do I put this? Well, let me back up. Some of the goals that he has, I share. Controlling the border, absolutely share that. Controlling the issue of fentanyl. Others, I would be happy if he did exactly what Eugene just said. Explain what you're doing. Give us an idea of where we're going. But I look at the team around him, and frankly, very few of them do I respect for their abilities. That's a scary thought. And that probably just got me in trouble in the Republican Party.
I'm going to change the subject just slightly here, still staying on the Trump presidency and his policies. On the surface, there is a lot more about change the Trump presidency is trying to bring about. And part of this, he's challenging the courts, for example, on deportation and the putting that one individual in the prison and the court saying you have to bring him back. Well, first of all, the court said you can't fly the planes down there, and the Trump administration did it anyway. And then they said you have to bring him back. And they're going, well, our hands are tied because El Salvador says it's not going to release him. Then we also have the threatening to take the tax-exempt status away from Harvard University and basically saying you're not going to get any money unless you make certain changes, including what we want to see as far as admissions policies go and also a diverse political opinion within your school. Also, barring the Associated Press from covering the certain events at the White House. Also on that line, a town hall meeting with Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is not the Trump administration, but maybe reflects it. Just the other day, a couple of people stood up to protest or to when she was talking to say they disagreed with her, and she waved her finger, and the next thing you knew that these two people, at least two, were removed by police physically and then handcuffed and taken out of the auditorium. So also there's a move to defund PBS and NPR. Now, the defunding of PBS goes. That's not the first time that's happened within the congressional hearings and that sort of thing, but this may be the first time the presidency has gone after PBS or NPR. Finally, just this morning, because the Fed chair yesterday said that, as I noted, that he said it's going to be a challenge for the United States federal government, or at least the Federal Reserve Board, to try to balance between holding down inflation because the Fed chair believes inflation is going to go up because of the tariffs. And if that's going to affect the job market, they also have to try to keep the job market in line. And so after he said that, the markets went down. And today the president said that the termination of Fed Chair Powell cannot come soon enough, which means if he does try to fire him, that's probably headed for the Supreme Court as well. So my bottom line in all of this, why all of these court challenges they seem to be pushing? Now, I may be wrong, but that seems to be what it is at this point.
Well, I think it is an effort to define exactly what the president can do. Because there is a battle between should all executive office employees be reporting to the president, and that includes the Fed chair and everybody like that, anything that's executive branch. And there's court cases, and I don't think we have the time to get into the court cases that started that, well, they are quasi-independent Supreme Court cases. Well, he's got a new Supreme Court, and he's got a Supreme Court that I think, is favorable to him in many different issues. And this is one of the issues as to shouldn't the president be able to say, okay, just as I replaced the Secretary of Transportation, I should replace the Secretary, at the Fed, and put in my person that reflects my executive authority. That's the issue that I think the media is starting to pick up on it. I saw a story this morning that I was reading about it. That's one of the big issues that's going to be coming in the next 6 months. The Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, or the United States, is going to be extremely busy between now and the end of June. And that's the traditional time that the hearings, all the cases that they hear, they make decisions by the end of June. They may not on some of these. They may want to bide themselves over until October and get some more time to figure out how they are going to have the influence on this. And at the same time, I think he's testing the authority of the courts. Remember, we have three branches of government. We have three legs to a three-legged stool. They haven't always been even. History demonstrates that. And right now, the executive is pushing, saying, I should be the one in charge of this three-legged stool.
I want to follow up on what the governor said there, because I think a lot of this is philosophical. Starting around the New Deal, really since then, a lot of executive functions have been given to these independent agencies: National Labor Relations Board, Federal Communications Commission, FEC. The list goes on, where the president nominates and the Senate confirms. So there still is a role for the president, but in nominating, because we sort of as a country, now not that all of us were in the private meetings, had decided we want the president to pick these people inside of the president's philosophy, but we want them to be independent of the day-to-day politics, where the Federal Reserve comes in, et cetera. The Project 2025, and again, on my side, hate it, et cetera. On the right, not everyone hates it, but what they're really careening towards is this philosophical discussion is, when you win the presidency, should all executive function be under your control, or also some of it to these independent agencies? And what Trump, I think, is trying, what President Trump, I believe, is doing, is that, and this is not new, I think Dick Cheney had a lot of these views as well, and that is they believe in having a stronger executive. And that's the fight we're going to be having in the courts over the next 6 months to a year and a half.
Historically, it goes back to the fights that FDR had with
That's right.
the Supreme Court. The fact that, because during that age, and that's history for me, I certainly wasn't around, probably none of you, obviously, but there's a lot of history. There's a lot of history in that he was, during time of war, during time of depression, pushing the limits of the executive and taking a lot on there. And in some ways, you can see some similarities here. The Supreme Court has pushed a number of the big issues that we're debating right now down to the district courts, but there's going to be a moment, where it's going to come back, and at some point, it's going to test whether the president can take on all these new powers on that one part of that three-legged stool. He's trying to redefine his part of the stool, and that's a little problematic, because as he redefines it, it affects the other two branches. So they're gonna have a tug of war here, and the optics are a little more difficult for this administration with the Supreme Court, because although we know they're supposed to be nonpartisan and service all, we all define every Supreme Court as right-leaning or left-leaning or moderate. This is clearly a Republican court right now. So if they play hardball with this president, the optics are different if they were a liberal or left-leaning court. He's going to have more problems even with his base if it goes out to an all-out war with this important third branch of government.
One thing, Stacey, if I could follow up, because I think Keith is spot on with that. We are going to see, and the governor's right too, we're going to see a battle between the courts and the president. That's coming. What amazes me is Congress is just, minus AOC and Bernie having these rallies, Congress is nowhere to be seen. Congress has ceded their power, not just to Mr. Trump, but the presidents of both parties for the last 40 years. Presidents have been sending troops now all over the world. Congress has never declared war. I mean, and they may have given an authorization. Look, if you look at the Constitution, Congress is supposed to be much more involved in at least okaying the president sending troops along. And also, when it comes to the battle with the court, look, I think this battle's coming. We need to brace up on this. Judicial review is not in the Constitution. We have all accepted judicial review, and and the governor and myself as attorneys in the world of the law, we just accept this. But I'm telling you, there's a fight coming on that as well.
There probably is. We're almost out of time. I'm sure we're going to be talking about the courts and the Trump administration and the role of Congress in all of this in upcoming editions. I do want to get to one final point here. And we've been talking about Republicans. We've been talking about the Trump administration. So former President Joe Biden delivered a major speech on Tuesday in Chicago.
Stacey, you're breaking up. I don't know if I've lost your signal now.
Well, here's my point: is this the right person right now to be carrying the water for the Democrats to be taking on Trump?
I have more confidence with my daughter doing it than Mr. Biden at this stage. I'll leave it at that.
Eugene, I literally had a hard time hearing you on that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'd say I'd have more confidence with my daughter taking on the president than Mr. Biden at this stage.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I mean, it is. I don't think the Democrats asked him to do it.
No.
This was a family idea. We need to get him back out there. It's unfortunately, I don't think it helps him at all.
Right.
But somebody wanted him to do it, and he did it.
We're going to build a library, guys. Jill and the former president want to be relevant. I don't think this is any coordinated event with any Democrats. I think this is their personal agenda. And right now, probably the best advice, and I don't want to give advice to the opposing party here, but James Carville has said repeatedly, don't have any spokesman right now. Let Trump be Trump. Right now, he's our best advocate because people are so confused. The pollings are moving against him. Right now, let's just see where this heads before we try to find a standard bearer.
Yeah,
and that's probably the best advice that he can give his party.
Look, I have enormous respect for the former president. I think he had a great public service career, but he's just at a stage now where he can't do this. But on the point of just brass knuckle politics, President Trump is great politically. Obviously, I'm not a fan, but he's great politically when he has an opponent to punch. When it's just him by himself, he really struggles. And the more Biden would be out there, the more that gives him someone to go out, because you know what he's going to do. He's like he's a predator. He sees that and goes, "Oh, I can start hitting Biden again, and that's going to help me." Look, if Joe Biden isn't on the scene, he's not going to have that person to hit, and I think he's going to flail a bit more. That's just brass knuckle politics, in my opinion.
Unless he goes after the progressives,
Right.
and I can see that happening. AOC, as you mentioned, Bernie.
Yep.
If they're going to pop their head up, he's going to go after them.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I agree.
He needs
somebody to go after.
He needs a political opponent.
Yeah. It doesn't need to be the Supreme Court. He should be careful there.
Oh, 100%.
I don't think he wants to go after a Republican Supreme Court.
Especially when he nominated
I
three of the
believe he's going to
justices.
challenge him.
Yeah, having a fight with Bernie and AOC is a whole different world than fighting the Supreme Court.
100%.
All right, we will get back into that on our next time we meet. We'll continue our look at politics on our next episode. Again, if you're watching or listening to this podcast, I urge you to hit the subscribe or the like button. But for now, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again in about 2 weeks or so.
Thanks, Stacey.
Thank you, Stacy.